Welcome students to the online NPTEL course Visual Communication Design for Digital Media. So in the previous module we started discussing about typography, and so we are discussing usage of typography in digital media. In the previous module we covered the introduction part of typography. We have gone through the evolution of typography and then morphology, how we understand how we identify a particular typefaces and distinguish a particular typefaces from the other typefaces. So after that we went into the classification of typefaces based on the morphology, how we classify different typefaces. So now we will come to the design aspect of a typography. So how typography can be used in design. So to do that, first we will discuss the aesthetics and functional attributes of typography, that is the pictorial quality of a of a particular typeface, and the legibility, that is the function. So typeface's function is to communicate, and so it's a mode of it's a very strong mode of visual communication. So when there is a typeface, if we can read it, so it communicates a message. So that the juxtaposition of typefaces with the pictures and the other design elements gives us a meaning. So that is the functional aspect of typefaces. So that is the mode through which it communicates is the legibility of typefaces. We have to read the typefaces. The other quality is the pictorial. So each and every typefaces, as we discussed, based on the morphology, has a particular visual style. So each the style of a Helvetica and style of Bodini, which is a serif font, and Helvetica, which is a sans serif font, is very different. Even there are larger variations which we will discuss in the design part. So that is there, and the next part is the selection of a typeface. So there is a large variety of typefaces available in today by the designers. So we can pick from a large range of typefaces. So which one to pick for a particular design, that we will discuss. And then in some cases for logo design, for brand identity design, we cannot pick up existing typefaces. We have to design our own typefaces in some cases. So how do we design our own typefaces from a particular mood board? So that we will touch upon. And then we will come to the to the functional part of the typefaces, that is achieving hierarchy. As we were discussing in the previous module, that hierarchy is a very important perspective of a important aspect of a visual design. So in visual design there has to be emphasis, there has to be to balance the emphasized area, there has to be some redundant spaces, some typography should just be legible and without any ornate features, and some typography has to be very bold to catch our eyes. So these will come under hierarchy. And then there is the impact of color, as we were discussing earlier, which adds to the legibility and creates a drastic visual impact. So selection of typefaces for design, that depends on a pictorial quality and legibility of a typeface. So these are two different things. If we increase the pictorial quality, so if we add ornamentations to a particular typeface and add on to the ornamentation, the pictorial quality will increase. So it will go towards this side of the diagram. And if we reduce the pictorial quality, or if we use the ornamentations, and if we change the typography towards the basic, abstract and minimal quality, that then the legibility of the typeface will increase, but pictorial quality will decrease. So based on that, we can have in broader three categories. So one is very graphical typography, another can be the display typography. So the display of a logo, so display of a shop front or some heading is a display typography. So which catches our eye, which catches the user's eye and creates a mental model, so which remains in our model. So we remember the typography. So there has to be some pictorial quality by which we will identify the typography. If the typography is very minimal, we might not remember the typography, it will not create an image into our mind. So that is the display typography, which will come somewhere in between. So there is some pictorial quality and some kind of has to be there, it has to be legible, otherwise we cannot read the what is the message. And then there is a typography for the text. So typography for the text is like in a book, the body of the text is the typography of the text. When in a newspaper, the typography used is typography for the text. So we don't pay a larger attention for the typography, what kind of typography they are using. So we just hardly notice that whether it's sans serif or serif, but we don't go into detail because in this context. So the content matters more, and the message what they are giving, the text is giving, that matters more than the aesthetic quality of a typeface selected in case of newspaper or in case of book or pamphlet, which is more informative than its aesthetic need. So these three classifications are not based on the classification which we discussed. The classification what we discussed is based on morphology in the previous module, and that was serif, sans serif, and all these humanist, grotesque, and geometric fonts were based on its morphology. But it's this classification is based on its pictorial quality and legibility. So in the first category, we have the graphical typography. For example, in a graffiti wall, the message is definitely important, but the typography doesn't stand alone, it goes with the graphics. So the color usage of the typography, the line quality, the shapes, textures, the color scheme, and line and everything, all the elements of design should blend with the visuals of a graffiti in case of graffiti, because that's more important. And when we look at a graffiti, if it attracts our eye, then we'll stand and start reading that. So we'll give more time to interpret that. It's not just we'll just read and go away. That is not the intention of a graffiti work. So it's a visual, it's a composition, and it's more has a more aesthetic importance than giving a message, because giving a message, it's not in graffiti wall, it's not just a typography, because it's all the pictures and everything together holistically gives a message. So here in this case, it has a higher pictorial quality and less legibility. Even in some cases, the legibility might not matter. For example, if we look at these two examples, one is the example of kalamkari. This is a traditional print media technique of Andhra Pradesh. So here we see vegetable dye printed on kalamkari style, and there are Telugu scripts inscribed in this. So for many of us, it might not be possible to read a Telugu script if we don't know the language. For example, in the same way, in Taj Mahal, this is the gate of Taj Mahal front gate. So in Taj Mahal's front gate, there is a Urdu script written, inscribed on top of the Taj Mahal script. But this goes as a graphical, and it's because of its aesthetic value, it enhances the work, architecture, or the traditional craft style by its visual quality. So if we mentally replace the Taj Mahal's Urdu script with Telugu typefaces, and the in the kalamkari here with the Urdu typefaces, it will not go with the picture, because we have certain visual each and every typeface has its own visual identity. For example, Urdu typefaces with its kashidas and all these dots and linear visual quality, it goes with the Saracenic style of architecture, Saracenic style of design. So if you look at the gates inlay work and this kind of typefaces, Urdu typefaces, this goes hand in hand, and they create a visual integrity in the typefaces. Similarly, the curvilinear Telugu script also has a which blends with the curvilinear features of kalamkari style. So here we read these typefaces as a pattern, not as a text. So that pattern, as we all know, is a again elements of design, so it's creating as a pattern. So if there is a blank patch, it might not, the composition might look blank here. So this pattern, the typefaces, which acts as a pattern for the people who doesn't who cannot read the what is written, acts as a pattern and balance the complete composition. The next will be the display typography, which is much easier to read than the previous one, but has certain kind of aesthetic ornamentation. So these are not flat typographies like the body of a text of or of a newspaper. So it has certain kind of ornamentation to it, because the need of a display typography is to create a brand. So if the we understand the Coca-Cola's logo and recognize the Coca-Cola's logo by its, definitely by its color, but also by its font. But if we create some font series which resembles Coca-Cola, we can easily identify this is some font which goes with the Coca-Cola brand, because this has created a widely accepted brand, and we understand the curvilinear feature of the Coca-Cola brand, which goes with the fluidity and has the liquidity into the typefaces. Similarly, if we look at the Linkin Park logo, which is a rock band, has the solid and angular and masculine corner, and which is this is actually a blended and distorted format of a thick, bold Futura font, and some parts are modified visually and modified with changes and made more angular to go with the which goes with the music band's song. Even the Pink Floyd, if we look at this, the fluidity of Pink Floyd, which is their genre of the song, also reflected in the typography. So there is a ornate ornamentation there in the typography, but still it's easy to read, and we can recognize the Pink Floyd's Pink Floyd band by its logo as well. Similarly, we all know that Bauhaus was a movement in modern era. So Bauhaus movement is more is also a derivative of Swiss the Estegel movement. So the Estegel movement and Bauhaus movement has a minimalist approach and usage of primary colors. For example, red, yellow and blue, and the black and white combination was more. So here in the Bauhaus color, Bauhaus poster, we can see that. And from that Bauhaus style, there was a Bauhaus font derived from that. So if we look at the font used over here, that's a Bauhaus font. And it also uses the pure geometric shapes. For example, if we look at the architecture's A, it starts with a pure circle, and then similarly in the C, H and T, E, we can see the pure circular format and the pure rectangular I think, because if we look at this closely, the thickness of each and every typeface is same. So that it also goes with the minimalist Bauhaus approach. Next, for more example, we can have Herb Lubelin's, the famous logo designer's usage of this display typography with little ornamentation, and readability is definitely more here than the previous graffiti works. So here we can see an intelligent way of depicting mother and child. So child is written in a small type fonts, so we need to have some give some effort to read that, but still the complete composition explains the relationship between mother and child to give a shape of a womb and child in a womb. And even in the marriage, the letter marriage, the R is blended together and creates a form. And in family also, we it's the similar. It shows the concept of family, and we can create with gestures principle, there's different kind of pupils image comes out of this typefaces. So there's are kind of different ornamentation added to it. So this L become looks like an I, but still it doesn't create any problem to read the word because of its meaning together, the pictorial quality of typefaces and the higher legibility. It doesn't create a problem. Then we have the simplest form of typography with least ornamentation and least tweaking. So that's the typography for the text, which is used for the regular text, which has least cognitive load on user's mind. Cognitive load on the user's mind has to be minimized so that we can read it fluently and quickly. If there are more ornamentations, people will start recognizing that, and it will take more time, and it will increase the cognitive load in our mind to read that. So that should not happen in cases of typography which is used in book and newspaper. And as I discussed, it's most suitable for body of text. And even in the poster, if there are the poster is heavy on typography, there are a lot of informations on text, we should not use typography with a lot of ornamentation. We should use basic minimal less ornate typography, so that people can devote their time on reading and read quickly and get the information most effectively. Next we come to the design of a typography. So here till now we were discussing how to select a typography. For some cases for designer, we have to design our own typography for a particular situation. For example, if we are designing for a shop front's shop's frontage, and we are discussing we are creating a brand identity for a particular brand or particular shop. So we need to design their own typography. So for example, we can take a case of Chinese typefaces. So here there was an example of a Chinese restaurant. So that should give a image of that there is a Chinese cuisines are served over here. So it should have a Chinese theme in the interior, it should have a Chinese look in the outside, and the typography should blend with that. So holistically, it should give a theme of Chinese cuisine. So for that, designers can use in many Chinese restaurants. We can see there's a definitely it has to be written in English, otherwise it will not be communicative to the larger English speaking audience. But it should also have a Chinese look. So what we see here is a Chinese typefaces, the visual quality, line qualities are translated into the English typeface, and a new kind of English typefaces is derived, which clearly gives a Chinese identity. So how is it happening? So we can have a closer look. So this is a Chinese original Chinese typefaces. Chinese, as we already discussed in the previous module, they used to draw with they used to write with a calligraphic pen on paper, because they have invented paper, as we all know, quite before, probably the first in the world. So on a white paper they used to use the black ink, which they used to ink with a pen which they used to make from a bamboo. So here in the calligraphic pen has a thickness variation. Here in each and every Chinese font is like that. So it has a triangular shape and it has a linearity, and it crosses. So if we see, each and every fonts doesn't match with each other, either it doesn't join, or either it crosses from each other. So there is no join like this. There's either like overlapping joints, or it doesn't touch. So here the similar thing is achieved over here. So here in the W, if we look, so it passes through each other, and also here the same thing follows. So nothing is properly matched. So that it gives a look of somebody have drawn it with a calligraphic pen. And also here we can see the triangular shape. So here this part is thicker and it gradually becomes thin to mimic the brush stroke which Chinese used to use. So if we generalize the process, so the first process is the adopting a mood board. So what we will put in our mood board, that matters. So that from that our visual identity will be generated. So here in this case, the Chinese typefaces, the visual quality of a Chinese typefaces was the mood board to create a Chinese font and give a and which will go with the Chinese restaurant and the interior design and the exterior lighting and everything of the restaurant. So next process is the visual analysis. We need to understand what is there in the Chinese typefaces, that is there in the that is the mood board in this case. So the visual analysis will be identifying the element of design, like we discussed. The designer here must have identified the characteristics of the font with its triangular characteristics and the overlapping features. So that is the visual analysis, and the line quality, the shapes used for particular designing a particular font. Then the visual adaptation. Now we have to change the Chinese font into English font, because we are not finally designing a Chinese font, it has to be in English. So we will take an English font. Each and every English font has to be again derived into its morphology. Based on its morphology, each and every part has to be segregated or deconstructed, and each and every part then can be translated into the Chinese style of visual identity. For example, here in if we take the case of W has 4 different strokes. The 4 different strokes were translated into the style of Chinese strokes, and then we create a W which looks like a Chinese script, but that's an English W, but which looks like Chinese script. So similarly, in case of other typefaces, we can translate that into different typefaces which will go with the thing. So these are important in bilingual signages and bilingual posters as well. So if we are designing some signages which should communicate with people speaking or reading different language, here for example Chinese and English, or Devanagari and English. So we should, both the signages should have some visual identity, otherwise the complete composition will not be holistic. And even if for a poster which should communicate in 2 different languages, the written text part of the poster should communicate in 2 different languages, the selection of font has to be so that it blends with each other. In some cases we might not have these kind of fonts which goes with each other, so that we have to create our own fonts based on the other keeping the other fonts visual characteristics in mind. So here in Arabic typefaces has its own characteristics of Kashidas. Arabics used to write from the other side, from right to left. So they used to join each and every words with a elongated Kashidas. These parts of the letters are called Kashidas, and they have a lot of dots on top of the main body of the text. So these are translated into the English font. So English fonts A, the joining of 2 stem of the A is dot, which is similar to the Arabic dot, which has this squarish form of the dot, because again of their usage of the calligraphic pen. When they use a calligraphic pen with a on a paper, so the dot might appear like a because of the thickness of the pen, it might appear squarish. So similar things are translated into these 2 typefaces designed from Arabic style of original Arabic typefaces. Similarly, in from Devanagari, this font which we are seeing here is Samarkand. Samarkand is designed from a Devanagari visual identity. This is a digital typeface which is available online, and there is a project called Hinglish project, which is done to communicate in with users speaking 2 different of 2 different target users speaking 2 different language, for English people who can only read English and people who can only read Devanagari. This their target audience mainly was the people who are the tourists, so they only can read English and try to learn Devanagari. So they can relate the English counterpart of the Devanagari script. So for example, we can see here A is A in Devanagari. So A and A is superimposed on each other. So this is the English project designed from a similar aspect. So again, from typography we can diversify, we can shift the paradigm and create product, create posters, and have a meaningful communication through usage of typography. For example, we have this lights coming out from a candle stand, where we have a Saracenic, Urdu or Arabic script with a lot of kashidas, and that kind of visual style is there, and the Arabic fonts are translated into different forms of visual identity. Here again the pictorial quality has more emphasis on the readability. Definitely readability is not compromised. Here again the Devanagari Om is translated into Ganapati's painting. Now we will come to the functional part of the typography. Previously we were discussing the visual attributes of typography. The functional part of the typography is meaning, conveying meaning. The typography will convey those messages, and in these messages for a visual designer it is important to understand, important to create a hierarchy of these messages. For example, in a newspaper, the newspaper headings will have the highest hierarchy of message, then the body of the text, and even in the newspaper's heading there will be more important newses and then the less important newses. So each and every heading can also will also be of different hierarchy. Even similarly in a poster, so posters theme might be more posters, for example for a movie poster, the movie's name can be the most of more hierarchical stage, and then the other informations, venues and other things can be of less hierarchy of importance, and the other detailing of detailed informations can be of less hierarchy of importance. So the people for the user who are in hurry, who can devote less amount of time looking at the visual, will only read, only concentrate on the highest hierarchy of information, and for the people who can devote more time and gradually will attracted towards the visual, can gradually go into the highest hierarchy towards the least hierarchy of the message. It will not be the other way around. So first it should not be the least hierarchy of message, then the highest hierarchy of the message. If that happens, then that's a visual design fault. So in that achieving hierarchy, a typographic hierarchy expresses an organizational system or content emphasizing some data and diminishing the other. So each level of hierarchy should be signaled by one or more cues. So the cues can be like line spacing, it can be the spatial arrangement, it can be the size of the font, it can be the style of the font, it can be the color. More contrasting color can have a highest hierarchy, less contrasting color can have a lesser amount and diminished amount of hierarchy. So there can be a permutation, even there can be a permutation combination of all these visual cues. So here there are some examples of the creating a different kind of hierarchy. There can be many more. So one is creating italics. If all these typefaces are in Roman and some part is in italics, so italics definitely because of its anomaly, it will go towards a higher level of hierarchy. Even for bold typefaces, because of its visual impact, it again goes into the higher hierarchy. Even in the body of the text, some part, the most important parts can be either bold or can be italics, and which then the people it will come to the user's eye faster than the other words. Even we can change the color, which again be based on the principle of anomaly. It will again attract user's mind, and then we can have small caps and the variation in font and serif, and by changing the serifs into sans serifs or vice versa, we can also create hierarchy. So these are all actually a process of creating anomaly and creating an emphasis. So while discussing serifs and sans serifs, we should go into deep of serif and sans serifs usage. So legibility comparisons of serif and sans serif is very important because it has a very different criteria. So if you can do this experiment in your with the WordPad. So if in print media we are using print media serif, we can use serif fonts, smaller serif fonts than sans serif fonts, which without destroying the legibility, because serif fonts has its distinguishable serif ends. If we reduce the font size, still it will be readable because of its ends are very prominent, so we can read it in print media. But for sans serif fonts, it might be difficult for reading in a very small typefaces, because the ends of sans serif fonts are not very prominent. But in case of digital media, it's completely the reverse, because digital display media. So in digital display media, there are light rays coming from behind, and the background, generally if the background is white, we all know that white in has more illumination and more higher value. So there are more light rays coming from the white region, and black doesn't emit much light rays. So here the end point of the serifs might be difficult to read if we difficult to read in cases of display typography. Even as we discussed in the previous module, serif ends were difficult to translate into a typography with in a display medium with larger pixels. So the end of the serifs and the modulations of the thickness of a serif font might be pixelated in a larger in a display system with large pixels. I mean low resolution pixels with where the each and every pixel units are larger in area. So here also in this for this cases, there were some pixelated fonts designed for display typography. For example, Emperor, which is easy to display with low resolution system. For example, M doesn't come is not a proper curve. It's some pixels juxtaposed, and it gives us a image of M. So here also, if we can read that side, this is new alphabets written with minimum pixels involved. So now we come to the examples of hierarchy. So here there are two famous posters designed. First is the US Army's poster designed in the during the World War. This is by James Montgomery. So here we can see the US's national color coding is a blue and red, which is created there, which is repeated there, and there is a hierarchy in typographic letters. So first, if we read the first lines, is I want you. You has more importance than the first two letters. So and if we look at the picture, look at the painting as well. So the person is looking pointing at you. So you creating a highest emphasis on the first in the first line, and then here it's written for the, which has some kind of redundant meaning. So U and US Army enlist, US Army has more importance. So US Army is bigger and thicker font, and enlist now, that what you have to do, that's written in a thicker font. And again on the right hand side we have the Cassandre's famous Art Deco poster, which is also informative and which talks about a cruise. So it invites people to book the cruise, and it tells the cruise's name, which has the highest importance, and the color contrast, and because of the dark background and the light font, it comes out, and it's also the height is more. And then the next contrasting level is the where it is, and the other next level of information is this, and these are the next hierarchy or the least hierarchy of the information, which is presented. Next, we have some of the posters designed by Satyajit Ray. He himself designed the posters. So, in the first poster, we can look the first hierarchy. In the previous cases, the first hierarchy was on the top. That is the general convention, but it might not happen because poster is a holistic visual composition. If we look at a poster, a photograph attracts our eye first, not the typefaces, because in the similar, if the photograph and the typefaces are taking similar area on a poster, the photographs are easy to recognize, and so it will attract people's eye first than the typefaces. For typefaces, we have to read the typeface and understand the meaning, which takes more time than understanding a photograph. So, photograph will definitely attract our eye first. So, that is why the Sataranj over here, the toppled king is attracting our eye first. This is the first focal point and first entry of user's eye into the visual composition. From here, there is actually a visual cue of similar typefaces into the poster's name, that is Sataranj Ki Khiladi, which is written over here, has a similar shapes. So, each and every typefaces shapes are similar to the form of each and every chase chase or Sataranj. So, here we have a visual connection. So, from here next hierarchy is the name of the movie, and these informations has a lesser and these are subdued and has a least level of hierarchy in this poster. Similarly, in this poster, the movie's name has the first hierarchy, and also you can see it's his own designed typefaces, Bengali typefaces. Here this has a similar visual identity, visual line quality and shapes matches with the ghost photograph, the funny ghost painting which he have done, has a similar color, similar angularity in the typefaces, and the next level of informations are on top and the bottom of the typefaces. And also it creates a balance in the typefaces. So, here in the first most hierarchy level is in the middle, and then it decreases on the top and bottom. And here also because of the color contrast, and it also has a 3D effect, and though it is flat, but it also has a 3D effect because of its one-sided color stroke. It creates a contrast because as most of the pictures are red. The poster is red, and this part is blue and yellow, which is to other primary colors. So, because of its color contrast, it's having a higher hierarchy. Also, it's bolder on size, and color is adding towards its hierarchical level. And similar thing we can look at into the newspaper. As we were discussing, different newspapers heading can also have a different impact. So, for a first example, this is a normal everyday's New York Times. So, in most of the newspapers heading is the most important thing, because that is the brand identity of the newspaper, and each and every newspaper we can distinguish by its name. So, it should have the most hierarchy in the first place. So, it is there in the daily newspaper, in New York Times newspaper, then the and which is definitely more ornate, you can see, and which is by this time this is the old style, and it also resembles that Gutenberg's Bibles which derived from directly calligraphic Gothic style of handwriting. So, that is there, and the next hierarchy is the headline and the body of the text. The first line is again highlighted because it's bold and longer, and then the body of the text is has the least hierarchy in these cases. But in the cases of 9/11, definitely it was a striking event. So, this is a exceptional case. Here you can see the US attacked, this news was so much more important. So, this dominates the newspaper's name. So, here in this case, the newspaper's names has a lesser height, and the main heading has a larger height, because that was so striking and that was so important. The message was so important, and this was a definitely a different case. And in a general scenario, you will not see there's a blank void space on both of the sides left in front of a on the both the sides of a type headline, because newspaper for each and every area, newspaper can generate money, and they can even they sell these areas for advertisement. So leaving a space is actually not economic. But as we all know that leaving a blank space augments the hierarchy of a particular message. So if there is a negative white space around informative area, so it enhances the legibility and attracts users mind. So that principle is also used, and here we can see all centrally aligned headlines. So generally that also doesn't happen, it's right aligned. So centrally aligned also creates an anomaly, and we try to read that first. And the next is the color contrast. So how we change the color and create more legibility or decrease the legibility of a particular typefaces. So here we have different we can have a different permutation combination of background and foreground color, and they will impact the hierarchy, they will impact the legibility of a particular text. For that we have Arthur and Passini in 1992 have created a visibility chart based on the color contrast index of a background and foreground text color. So he had have given a mathematical formula. We'll discuss the formula, but before that we can see which has the highest color contrast. So yellow on black has the highest color contrast, and these gradually comes to the least color contrast. But all of these has a most legible color contrast. There are other color contrast color schemes like green and red has less visibility, and other examples like gray and black might also have a least visibility. So for this we can from this diagram we can see that we also have seen that airports text and informations are generally written on black letters on yellow. So they use yellow black combination because it has the highest legibility of if we consider the color combination. So the Arthur Passini's formula of creating to identify the color contrast mathematically is like this. So he have assigned the color light reflectancy ratio of each and every color. So for example, red has 13, yellow has 71, and blue he have assigned 15 in terms of light reflectancy. So also we can see the more the value of the color is, that is the lighter the color is, its light reflectancy will be more. So white has 85, which has the highest, and black has 8, which is the lowest. So his formula of readability is K1 minus K2. K1 is the highest LR or the light reflectancy minus the lowest LR or the lowest LR, that is the K2, whichever will be there in the foreground or background. For example, in this example, K1 and K2 will be red's 31 and black is 8. So 31 minus 8 divided by K1 or the highest color value, that is the red's color value, that is the 13 over here, multiplied by 100, that will be the contrast value H. And by its study, he have done several ethnographic study, and he have conducted many questionnaires with users, and he have done he have surveyed many people, and he identified that if the H value of H is less than 70, it is very difficult for users to read. It should be at least 70 or more than that for its legibility. More the value is, more the value of contrast value or H is, the more legibility the color combination, the background and the text color combination will be. So this is it for the typography segment, and thank you.